Welcome everybody. We're going to start our breakaway session, this particular track. My name is Maurits Pretorius. I'm the Executive for Strategy and Comms at PASA, and I'm going to be the facilitator for this track straight through until we again meet in the plenary session. I'm just going to, perhaps in terms of some order rulings, we are going to keep it fairly seamless. So after every speaker, we're not going to allow time for you to break and move to another session. If you want to, you are welcome to do that, but just stand up and move out silently, and we'll also allow people that wants to enter the room to just come in and find a seat. But I think you've made an excellent choice. You're at the right place now. I don't foresee that any of you will move out of this room. So I'm looking forward to three fantastic presentations today in the form of our first international speaker, Gavin Roberts, and I'll introduce him in a moment. But then we're also going to go to Sandeep Kumar Araya, who's going to take us into the world of mobile banking and tell us a little bit more what Samsung is doing and where things are moving. And after our break, our lunch break, we'll have Dr. Arif Ismail from the Reserve Bank, and he'll tell us everything that the governor didn't want to tell us. So stick around, please. You know, I'm sure you're going to enjoy what we have today. Hopefully, there's going to be time for questions in and around the sessions. I think we're a small enough audience. I would welcome questions. We will keep it as interactive as possible. I love the dialogue, and I think there's so many people that can contribute to whatever is presented here, that we have to make the best use of the fantastic network that we have in this room, and the brainpower and the opinions that we have in this room. So I really welcome that. So without further ado, let me introduce our first speaker, Gavin Roberts. Now, he is currently with JP Morgan. He's going to talk to us about the role that technology plays in payments operations specifically. I think he brings a great global perspective on that. Just a little bit more about him. Born and bred in Manchester area. Educated there with Manchester University. He's got a degree in economics. And lots of experience. I think, Gavin, you've been with JP Morgan since 1994. So I'm sure, the development curve that he's seen through the financial crisis, etc., would be something fantastic to share. The only thing he's asked me to do is to limit questions about Brexit, because they're still figuring out how they should have voted, so... Now, he actually said, as far as possible, and what he can answer, even things like that is open. So you will also then understand that having grown up in Manchester, you've got one sport, that's national sport of soccer. And there's only one team to vote for and to support either. That's Manchester. The question is it Manchester City or Manchester United? That's the big debate now. But without further ado, Gavin, it's really a privilege to have you in South Africa, to welcome you here today, and we are looking forward to your input in your presentation. Over to you.
For those of you who've not read the biography, it's Manchester City is the correct choice. Anyone who wants a drink at the bar afterwards can support Manchester City. If you support Manchester United, you buy your own drinks. So yeah, thank you for the warm welcome. I guess I guess this is my third trip to Africa. It's my third trip to Johannesburg. Starting to kind of get out and explore a little bit and see this fantastic country. I do dispute a little bit what Nancy said earlier about being out in the outside into the countryside and having cell phone connectivity. I know yesterday when my colleague and I were trying to find the lion and the rhino reserve just down from the cradle of humankind, we did get a little bit lost. My iPhone still said I was in Bournemouth on the south coast of England, so clearly my iPhone setting wasn't quite where it needs to be. But we eventually found where we need to get to and saw two great attractions. So as we said in the introductions, the focus today really going to talk about global banking operations and what that means, and kind of talk through some of the challenges that brings and some of the opportunities, and then going to focus through that in terms of how we leverage technology to hopefully make our global banking operations team a success. So we'll start off by pulling that into some sort of context. I'll talk about our operating model in the payments business specifically at JP Morgan. We'll talk about some of the drivers and what success looks like within that operations team. And then we'll get into the detail of some case studies and some examples where we've leveraged technology as an enabler for being successful across those objectives. So a lot of detail on this slide. What we're trying to show here is for banking operations, what does a global operating model look like? So why don't I just start off by putting that into a bit of context. So in terms of our operating model, we have 6,000 staff just in the payments business. Obviously, JP Morgan's about 250,000 staff worldwide. So 6,000 staff across 40 different locations spread across the globe. And just as a reminder in terms of what that looks like from a product feature set, as everyone knows that JP Morgan's got this reputation as being the number one US dollar clearer across wires and ACH clearing. And that when we do about 20 million payments a day, so that's kind of the scale size. What sometimes is less well known is what does that mean outside of the US then, Gavin? What do you do? So we're in the top 5 by either volume or value in terms of SWIFT volume every day. We're in the top 5 for SWIFT. And what's maybe less well known is then for sterling and for euro, again, we're in the top 5 by value on a daily basis. So a kind of a strong kind of product set that this global operations team sits around. If I look at how we're organised for my specific responsibilities, I'm the operations lead for Europe, Middle East, and Africa for the payments business. So obviously we're a subset of those numbers. We have about 800 staff, and we're split across 20 locations that I'll talk about in a moment. So how do we organise beneath that, which we start to lay out on the slide here? And I only show this just in terms of context because this is going to kind of set the scene for the importance of technology and the importance of leveraging technology to make ourselves and our operating model successful. So what we have here is those 40 different locations. We have a split of what I would call in-country locations, and we have one here in Johannesburg. So in addition to locations that we have in Toronto and Mexico City and Riyadh and Hong Kong and Kuala Lumpur and so on, we have an in-country presence. We supplement that with what I would call regional centres as opposed to local national centres. So our regional centres tend to be Chicago, Tampa, Hong Kong, Singapore, and then for our region it is Bournemouth, where as you know I am based. And then on top of that we have what we call our global service centres, which is the operation centres we've built out in India and the Philippines, certainly for the payments business, Buenos Aires outside of the payments business, where we house a large number of our staff, and they really run the engine of operations on a day-to-day basis. So if you take those things in totality, hopefully you see we have global in terms of presence and locations, global in terms of the coverage and the products we offer to our clients. And I gave the example of payments not just being about US dollar. It's much broader than that. And clearly what that means is that we are global in terms of our client base. So, whether our clients are global clients, they're regional clients, or any mix of those, we're able to offer products and services which we're able to support them. So just a few comments before we move on to get into the detail of where we leverage technology. So there are some significant benefits and some significant challenges by being a global operations team rather than a local or a national one. And some of these will be familiar to folks in the room. So I'll start with the benefits. And the benefits only stay benefits because of how we leverage technology in a lot of cases. That was technology kind of failing, I think. So the benefits, I guess, clearly being a large organisation and having scale means you can deliver that scale to your clients. Clearly, you can only do that if you've got a strong technology backbone that sits beneath that. Clearly, the operating model we've got here, kind of allows us to leverage primary cost locations and tertiary cost locations, and then some lower cost locations to kind of make sure we have the right mix of people and use of our cost base appropriately. Clearly, an operating model like this, if you manage it successfully, particularly if you hook in correctly with technology, will improve your resiliency and your ability to transfer functions, not just between cities in the same country, or even cities in the same region, but truly be able to transfer work from a Bournemouth to a Tampa to a Bangalore, which we do and we test on a regular basis. And clearly we benefit from a fantastic diverse workforce, leveraging the skills and strengths across all of those countries and all of those cities. So challenges that we face by being a global rather than a regional or a more local organisation. Clearly, span and scope that we've got here, the 40 locations, 6,000 employees, bringing that team together and providing a consistent message so we're all working to the same objectives is an ongoing challenge. Doing that, the service we offer to clients on a consistent way, whether it's the process of being done in a Chicago versus a Mumbai versus a Hong Kong, is absolutely key, but remains a challenge that we need to focus on, and we do leverage technology to allow us to do that. And I guess then, there's something we're all familiar with. Each of the countries we have a presence in has its own local regulatory requirements, and clearly that does drive the need not only for standardization and working on a global basis, but clearly it does require a need for technology to support bespoke solutions for rather regulators, and in some cases, as we know, for clients. And I guess that whole kind of comes together in terms of how do we connect the dots, both from a operations point of view, a client point of view, and a regulatory reporting point of view. So that is the context that I wanted to talk about today. As we move on now, I'm going to talk around what is important to global operations, and we're going to start to build up that picture of where technology has a key role to play, and then we're going to get to the case studies on the final slide, where we'll get to where we've leveraged that within the payment operations team at JP Morgan. So what I put up on this slide is not meant to be particularly new or revealing. This is very familiar to a lot of the people in the room, but it is important to kind of get that basis of how we run our global operations. Before then, we can start to understand in detail how we leverage the technology. So if we look on the left-hand side of the screen, financials, productivity, and efficiency. And as we say on the screen, tracking the financials, our headcount planning, cost reductions, waste elimination, Then driving into productivity around number of transactions processed per employee, what is our straight-through processing rates, what is our average answer time for when the phone rings with a client inquiry, what's our average handle time for that inquiry. All areas that require significant focus, and particularly when you're trying to run a global organisation, making sure that the targets that you've got for productivity are consistent, and if we're looking at number of transactions an individual should repair or number of phone calls an individual should be able to handle, we want to do that on a consistent basis, whether you be in whichever city or whichever country you may be based in. There's plenty of seats down the front if people want to come down and sit on the front row. So then back also into productivity. Clearly, if the challenge for us as an operations team is to process more volume, more value, to process more quickly, recognising controls and quality, kind of day by day, year on year, then clearly the way we leverage technology is going to be key, both in terms of bringing our cost base down, but also allowing us to kind of achieve those productivity targets, which will then allow us to be to reinvest in our platform and make our global platform even more successful. Top of the middle stack, we start to talk in a little bit more detail about clients, I guess. So we start by talking about quality and accuracy. So clearly providing that service, hitting our service level agreements, kind of achieving all we want to do in terms of customer service quality is really key. And why do we want to do that? Well, we want to beat the client expectations. We want to meet all of our regulatory expectations, irrespective of which location and which jurisdiction we're processing in for those clients and for those regulators. And then we want to start thinking about, well, yeah, we get quality and accuracy is important, but how do we target the quality and accuracy service we provide to particular clients? So if we have premium clients or top tier clients, however we want to describe them, how do I leverage my operating model to make sure that the service they get is truly differentiated? So I'm not going to reduce the service offering and the service levels for my broader client base, but there may be a small percentage of clients who drive revenue who I really want to focus my operating model around. So if I've got a transaction or a phone call or an inquiry coming in from one of those clients, I want to know about it, and we need to leverage technology to allow us to do that. But then also maybe I want to provide some additional levels of service to that transaction or that inquiry, to make sure that I'm really kind of focusing on my premium clients. And I'll talk more about that on the next slide. Next, the final box on the middle stack there is people. And I know we all have people as part of our objectives, and I get there may be some kind of questions, thoughts in the room now saying, well, this is a presentation about leveraging technology and it's about global operations. So how does the people element fit there? So I think about it in terms of twofold. One is whether we've got frontline staff or back office staff, we're in a service industry supporting our clients. We want to give our people the best tools and resources to service the client. And clearly a large part of that resource base now is in is technology. And how do I make sure that as my frontline staff to my back office staff are able to do the job to their best their ability? Clearly, technology plays a key role there. Technology can also be an enabler in the fact that if we start to build an environment of best-in-class, state-of-the-art technology, then that will be an enabler in terms of innovation for our operations team and our other support staff. And we want to see technology as being that enabler which gets people to think about, how can they do their job differently with the aim of kind of providing that service to the client. So linking in the people and the technology components of our operating model is really key. Right-hand side, and two interesting top areas to kind of focus on this page. One being risk and controls, and then we get into the final pieces. I want to talk about the client before we get into the case studies. So no surprise that we have risk and control on here as part of one of our key objectives for a global operations team. Where the technology leverage comes into play, and again, we've got some really good examples coming up on this, is clearly I want to automate as much as possible. I want to take cost out of the system as much as possible. I want to focus on the client and providing the value-added service as much as I possibly can. Clearly, in doing that, in the environment we're working now, and particularly the last kind of 5 to 10 years, clearly the control environment is also paramount to us being successful in our role as global or as a global organisation. So really making sure that whatever automation we do, leveraging technology, is done in a smart way. We don't reduce any of our key controls. We actually add to those controls, and we add to the kind of the robustness of those controls is key. Finally, I talked about client, and I guess there's a couple of areas where when we talk about the client and what we want to do, it's making it easy for the client to do business with us, and that may be whether it's opening a new account, it may be raising an inquiry, it may be a question around their bill. However that client wants to interact, we want to make that as easy as possible. And clearly there are multiple mediums the client can transact with us, and we want to make sure we have best-in-class opportunities to do that. Talk more about that on the next page. And again, I guess what the client also wants, and I think we're all familiar with sometimes technology goes wrong. So sometimes it's, we don't have the stability we'd like. Clearly, from a client perspective, the expectation is we have great stability and great availability of technology 100% of the time. But they also recognise sometimes that's not going to occur. And maintaining a highly stable environment, but also then when we do have issues, resolving those in a very timely manner and making sure we communicate with our clients in a very timely manner is absolutely key to the client. And then obviously technology plays a key role there. So this is this is the slide where we start to talk about some examples around having now understood the context of our operating model and talked around what's important as a global operations team. This is where we now start to kind of bring it together in terms of leveraging technology. And we've kind of split it into 4 areas that we want to focus on. So process automation, and I've got some 3 really good examples of where we've leveraged that. We'll then talk about client service enhancement specifically, and that piece I just referenced around ease of contact and then ease for the front office staff to kind of resolve a client inquiry in a timely manner. I will talk about imaging. Imaging may be a little bit kind of old technology, but there's some really good ways I want to talk around how we can continue to leverage some of that older technology for the benefit of a global operations business such as ours. And then I will go through the regulatory and controls piece in terms of how do we leverage technology, to kind of make our control environment more robust and to try and identify patterns of behaviour which may be a concern either from a sanctions point of view or a fraud and a cyber point of view. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about fraud and cyber because there is there's a very good session that a colleague of mine, Kamlesh Hari, is going to run tomorrow called Fib or Fact, I think he's called it in terms of cyber. So back to what we've got here and process automation. So if you look at the top of the slide there, we have straight through processing. So clearly how we leverage the data we have that comes into us from clients and the data we have in our operating model and our databases is key in terms of driving STP as high as we can. So from a client point of view, in terms of being able to send a payment through, it not require operator intervention and can be therefore either crediting their account or it can be processed outward into the clearing and received to the beneficiary on a timely manner is critical. And I think through my times within this business, we've seen our payment STP rates go up from about 80% now into the kind of the high 90%, and clearly that has a significant benefit to the client. And where we've seen particular benefits is being able to look at that on a global basis. and kind of leveraging the same best practices and the same technology, whether we be in the European, Middle East, Africa region like I am, versus whether I'm in the Western Hem doing US dollar clearing, or I'm in Asia Pacific. So artificial intelligence, pattern recognition and matching, coupled with, of course, client education to allow them to format their payments in a best-in-class STP manner is really important. Receivables, and I put this on here because a large part of the 6,000 workforce we have in banking operations, it's about 2,000 or so, are in the receivables business in the US. So these are our check processing lockbox factories, who are literally receiving, hundreds of thousands of checks per day and need to process them on behalf of clients. Clearly, the action there is very, very routine, very, very repetitive. And what we want to do is try and take staff away from doing the routine, almost machine-like kind of repairs, to get them to focus on value-added services for our clients. So what we've done there is we have high-speed imaging equipment. We've got a number of products which allow us to truncate the check, turn it into electronic format, and then once it's in an automatic format, clearly we can then engage our full power of STP processing to complete the transaction. And then for those pieces of manual paper that we can't get rid of, we can't truncate because of the nature of the business. There's some really clever stuff we've been doing around barcodes to allow us to track that piece of paper through our system. So when we get an inquiry on that piece of paper from a client, we can easily work out which step in the process it's gotten to, and then obviously kind of make sure it gets resolved in a timely manner. The third example on here, when we talk about process automation, actually is a different flavour again. So we've talked around STP from a client point of view and a transaction they want to process out to the clearing. We've talked about some of the paper we get into our operations and how do we either image or 3D it or truncate it. A lot of the time, STP processing to me is around how do I get data through the global organisation that we manage. How do I get data from my front office into the back office and then out again to wherever it needs to get to. And this cash position management function is really interesting in the fact that, so this is basically our treasury reporting. So how do I take the data from all of my product front office applications, whether it be related to, could be payments, but also could be custody transactions or FX transactions or derivatives. How do I take that from my front office client-facing application, feed that into my back office cash management system, which becomes part of the operating model I'm responsible for, and then turn that into accurate data on a timely basis that can be given to Treasury, who at the end of each currency kind of window know whether they need to, what position they need to cover in the market. It struck me when we started to look at this about 3 years ago in detail, how much data we have in our bank and in our system at some point, but ultimately that data does not travel STP to the trader who then can make his decision. There are operations folks and middle office folks who are taking data from one system and then manipulating it and keying it into another to allow it to continue on its way. And it's just, it's one of those kind of things that always kind of maddens me, the fact that we have data and then literally you're taking it from one report, keying it into another system and uploading it to a report and then allowing it to continue on its way, which clearly is hugely inefficient. So that transfer of data is another of the areas that we focus on from an STP point of view. And then the other piece I wanted to kind of highlight on this page was that client service and enhancements. So 3 areas here. We have a global investigations platform. So we don't have platforms by region or by location. We have one investigations platform for the payments business. Now, what that means from a client point of view, if I'm raising an inquiry today, then I have a global team who can kind of track that. And we've actually seen examples where payment investigations get resolved from the sender of the investigation into JP Morgan, into banking operations, back to the sender, within as many as 8 seconds to fully resolve an investigation, because we don't have a kind of disparate set of investigation tools. It's one global tool managed by the global teams. And then when you kind of get into telephony and service portal again, how do I get the phone call from a client to the right person as quickly as possible so they can answer it? And then service portal says, well, okay, how do I make sure that, you know, all the tools are available to one client, to the client-facing person, so they can answer that inquiry as soon as possible? And we've moved from as many as 40 applications that individuals have had to use down to one to allow us to answer that question in a timely manner. I do want to leave a little bit of time for questions, so I'm just going to go to regulatory and controls, and then I'll close off through and we'll go to some questions. So regulatory and controls in terms of how we leverage technology. Firstly, business activity monitoring. So how, as an operations manager, do I know that there is an unusual activity happening within my system? How do I know that my volumes maybe are 20% above the norm, or maybe my values are 20% below the norm at any particular point in the day, rather than waiting till end of day checks and overnight batching to tell me that? That's where business activity monitoring kind of is being used. So I can build an alert, which a user-defined alert, which says if I hit one of those thresholds that I define, could be volume, could be value, could be some market events, client behavior, I want to send that to an operator for them to investigate and review and to determine whether there's any further action required from an operations point of view. Equally, when we get into sanction screening and fraud, clearly areas that have grown significantly over the last 5 years, initially on sanctions, I think now in fraud and cyber. How do I identify a break to a norm? So if I look in the fraud space, and Kamlesh will talk about this in more detail tomorrow, if I've got a client who's making a payment to a beneficiary, and it's the first time he's paid that beneficiary, or I've got a client who typically deals in hundreds of thousands of dollars and now has got a payment going for $1 million or $10 million, I'd really like to know that, you know, before I process it STP, to allow me to intervene and maybe contact the client, maybe just do a little bit of research on my own. And again, how we get that data all exists within our organization, and how we leverage that is going to be really key in terms of driving our success, both from a client point of view and obviously from an overall firm point of view. So I just want to kind of close off kind of with asking for any questions. I think then we may have time to kind of be ready for the next presentation.
Thanks so much, Gavin. I was just wondering, from listening to you, I think the first thing that came to mind is everybody is now looking into robotic process automation, or RPA as they call it.
Yep.
And you know, since we're talking about technology and also the impact on operating models, you know, I think something like that has implications for not just your operating model, but one thinks about API integration, open architecture, stuff like that. Any thoughts on where that is going to take us and how you are starting to think about that?
Yeah, so we've had a team looking at robotics for a little while now. You know, and I think what we've concluded is exactly as you kind of introduced it. There's significant opportunity here to take out that human repair, and particularly that repetitive repair process, whether it be a payment or maybe it's, you know, the matching of, you know, statements and ledgers through some form of Nostro reconciliation process. And the benefits that we're seeing in terms of the pilots we've started to do are staggering. I think the success of this will be to do it in a kind of coherent manner. So once you've got out of pilot phase where we are at the moment, which I think we all know is going to prove that this could really work, I think then it's a matter of saying, well, how do we lay this out across, you know, a global operating model across the as I talk through to benefit. So absolutely, it's an opportunity. I think the way we leverage the technology as ever is going to be the key. And you know, focus it onto the right areas and the right technology. Maybe perhaps rather than focusing it onto legacy technology where we know the benefits won't be so great, There's probably certain areas we want to target to get the maximum benefit, while the legacy technology kind of catches up.
Thank you, Gavin. Any other questions? I'm going to pass you the mic.
Jackie Barwell from ACI Worldwide, and first of all I want to apologise for our sign falling off mid-presentation.
I won't hold it personally.
I'll get some stronger glue. My question is relating to your last piece on your automation enabling you to do fraud and compliance checking for transactions going out of the bank. Do you use that same monitoring capability to monitor for internal fraud events?
Internal fraud by?
As in monitoring staff.
Monitoring staff. It's a really good question. So it's a different set of tools we use, but it uses the same sort of pattern matching that I talked about. So what we're looking at now is if I've got if I've got an individual who I know only processes payments, and maybe they only ever debit a client account through the repair process they do, but they have the system access to do that more broadly today. And if I can't restrict that system access, what I might be interested in, if then they then debit a wash account or a Nostro account or an internal house account, however we call it, I might like to know about that, kind of real time, to allow me to do some initial investigation to see whether that is the norm or not. Typically, again, it might be, if I can build a profile up against a member of staff, I can build a profile which says these are the systems they use, these are the volumes and values they do, this is the average value payment they do. If they suddenly worked, normal hours, 9 to 5, 8 till 6, whatever, 7 till 7, I'm trying to think what normal hours looks like. But if I suddenly then kind of did a payment repair or initiated a payment at 3 o'clock in the morning, and maybe I logged on from home and did it rather than being in the office, again, I might like a senior member of the team to at least review that and say, well, yeah, that makes sense because of X project or Y event, or maybe on the 1% of the time, it'll be something that is a bit unusual and you want to take some action against. So yeah, it's taking a lot of time to build that profile is the problem. Trying to do that for 6,000 employees and then make sure you don't get thousands of false alerts every day is where the skill is going to be. Thanks for the question.
Thanks, Gavin. I think we'll have time for one more question. Any further questions? There we have one. The mic is coming to you.
Thank you. My name's Jateel from KPMG.
Hi.
I guess one of the key things we talk to when we're talking to some of the innovation coming through is the dependency on data. So you've mentioned that a lot of the focus on robotics, process automation, is strongly dependent on good quality data. What's your views on the intensity and activity that organizations are currently undertaking in ensuring quality and adequate data governance to ensure success of some of the innovation coming through?
Yeah, so I think the question was around robotics and other tools being dependent on the quality of data that is available to systems. And I think one of the things we've looked at in probably I'd say in pockets at the moment, but intraday liquidity was a good area where we want to get a better feel for the data where we're making our intraday liquidity decisions on, whether that be treasury or whatever. We spent a lot of time with what I would call kind of that data cleansing process, which basically saying is I can get data STP, Gavin, so I can get it from, now I've got it from front office to back office, back to the trader. Clearly, if the data is incorrect or is only partial, then all I've done is automate a kind of a partial or incomplete process. So you're absolutely right, making sure as well as the STP element of that, getting that data cleansed in the first place, and making sure the data is understood by who's going to be using it, and then STPing it is where you'll get the maximum benefit.